I've came out here and I think I do feel like there are two people in the world that are taking on this stance. It's me and my buddy Josh Pate. Okay, let me throw out a scenario to you. So the SEC is going to be keeping the eight game conference schedule, right? That's what they agreed upon. Joe, if you're 8-1 team and you're Tennessee, let's just give an example, Tennessee, and you have a playoff berth on the line, okay? And if you're Tennessee, you have to face Georgia, UT, Martin, and Chattanooga State. What versus you being in the Big Ten and you got to face Northwestern, Nebraska, and let's just hypothetically throw in Michigan. Which schedule would you take?
Rather take the Big Ten one.
You take the Big Ten one. It's not created equally. When you have LSU, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, and I will even throw them in this, Florida when they're up, it's never created equally. Joe, you laughed at me and got mad at me when I said the following things. There's no business that the Pac-12 champion should lose to a 6-6 Florida. This is my point. This has always been my point. When you have a P5 champion losing to a lower tier SEC team, do you understand how difficult it is for me or any coach that really wants to back this? Now, as a fan, let me say this. I want to see more competitive games. I don't want to see like LSU or Alabama or Tennessee or Georgia face UT Chattanooga. I don't want to see that. But I understand it. And truthfully, until the Big Ten, Big 12, Pac-12, and ACC can religiously put out national champions, what are you doing? We play more conference games than you. And would Georgia have playing more conference games? Would that have mattered against TCU? Newsflash, it wouldn't have.
No.
It wouldn't have. There have been 5 SEC teams since 2000 that have won national titles. All 5 of those teams have either won another one or have gotten back to a national title. You have Auburn, Alabama, Florida, LSU, and Georgia all in that footprint. Everybody else not in the Southeast, including Clemson in that. The only other team to remotely do anything worth a damn is Ohio State. So it's difficult for me, Joe, to come on this platform and to come on this show and say the following. Let's have another conference game. Let me tell you the truth. Greg Sankey don't want another conference game because if he did, it would be over with. That's my opinion.
So, Blake, as this whole thing unraveled, my thoughts on it it's changed drastically. It has dramatically changed because if those who tuned in when we first opened this debate, when there was the vote that was going to occur, right, my stance was let's get more games. I want more competitive games. As an enjoyer of football, as somebody in the business of sports, I want more competitive football games
and
on
I'm
a
with
week-to-week basis.
Just so we're on clear, I'm with you on that, but continue.
And I would even put it to the point where I want it to be as close to the NFL product as possible, where you could have a team that's in last place that could surprise a top team in the NFL. You can't get. It is so rare for Austin Peay to show up and beat Alabama. That's just not going to happen.
There's no Austin Peay in the NFL,
right? Because you're limiting the interactions with
going to the Super Bowl.
It's the equivalent as if a USFL team showed up to play the Chiefs when Austin Peay has to play against Alabama. You don't even have those interactions. Those interactions don't even occur. So I would love to have 9 games just from an enjoyer of good competitive football. More games is good for the sport. But as I've seen this whole thing unravel, I totally understand why it's not good for the SEC for 2 reasons. And Sankey had this quote saying for this first aspect that, money follows. It doesn't lead. I'm kind of paraphrasing there. They weren't going to get the money right away for that 9th game. So it doesn't really behoove them to add that 9th game. But to the bigger point that you're bringing up now is that why would teams schedule with this new expanded playoff more difficult games when it could detrimentally impact them from making it into the playoff? Because you know what? The committee is going to pick a 2-loss Penn State team that gets blasted by Ohio State and Michigan over a 4-loss SEC team. It is inevitably going to happen
No question.
if that comes down that road.
No question.
So to avoid that, get more easy games on the schedule.
And it would be like what we saw a couple years ago. You have a 9-3 Kentucky going up against a 10-2-ish Penn State team.
Yes.
Kentucky takes them down handily with opt-outs. Oh, well, Blake gets the bowl season. Okay. Okay. Cool. Here's the thing for me, though, Joe. Why is the SEC dominating in these week 1 matchups, these neutral site matchups? So historically, when you have LSU versus Oregon, and I know LSU lost to Florida State last year, but again, it's still a Southern team that has had national implications a lot of times before. When you have Georgia taking on Notre Dame and Clemson in the non-conference, and you're out here trying to tell me, oh, well, they don't play a tougher schedule than me. The hell that they don't. Name a team that Ohio State, outside of like Notre Dame, okay, in their little bit of a footprint. Has Ohio State ever gone? They went to Oklahoma, and remember Baker Mayfield put the flag in the middle. But and it's the reason why they don't do it anymore. Why didn't Ohio State ever schedule in Georgia? Now, they scheduled LSU, but they scheduled LSU in like 2037. 2037. Okay, well, that doesn't really mean that game's not getting played anymore. USC is going out and played Alabama. They don't care. They'll take on the risk, and I applaud them for that. UCLA has done it.
And as much as you crap on Notre Dame on this program, Notre Dame has actively gone out to compete with SEC
Well, they kind of have to. They kind of have to. They don't have a baseline conference. So,
yes,
I'm throwing Notre Dame out of it. But even though I agree with you,
okay,
they obviously, they're an independent team. They have to go and play Power 5 opponents. I mean, it's okay. Let's not forget that they played Marshall and got beat. Okay, just throwing that out there.
Okay, that was one season. Stop. That doesn't equate to this. It doesn't equate to this.
Well, here's the truth. Until September, I have until September to continue to bring up that argument.
All right, fine.
All right, sounds good.
Fair. That's fair.
Bottom line, though, is if I'm Kentucky and I'm 9-3 and have a potential to get into the playoff, why would I want to play? So if I'm Kentucky, I already more than likely have to play Tennessee, Georgia, okay? If I have to add another conference game, why would I want to play LSU, Texas, or Oklahoma? Why would I want to play Texas A&M? It doesn't behoove me. And by the way, you're not getting paid for that 9th game, but here's what people forget. You do get paid to make the playoff and a crap load of money. So when all is said and done and all this, this is the argument that I hate the most, is everybody's like, oh, we want it to be equal. You literally play a sport which ultimately decides if you are equals or not. You're playing an athletic sport, a competitive sport, and why everybody loves competitive sports is because not everybody walks out there with a trophy. Joe, I would rather and this is what pissed me off. In 2003, LSU and USC had a split before Reggie Bush started cheating with Ed Orgeron. I don't like this split national championship thing. Okay? Why does everybody deserve a participation trophy? They don't. They don't. So you can rip on me, and I told you this in the playoff last year. You were like, a 2-loss team has no business getting in the playoff. Okay, well, are we sure about that? Because if it's about the best product, what you're saying, if you're a 9-game conference truther and you're saying it's about the product, then you should be screaming at the rafters for last year Tennessee and Alabama not getting in the playoff over TCU. Because those two teams have bigger business, they have a bigger outreach. And by the way, let's call it what it is. They are the better teams. They are the better teams. Clemson's a better team than TCU last year. You know it with DJU.
Yes.
They're just better teams. Here's another truth that you're not going to like. Well, you might actually like this one.
Okay.
Even if you throw a 9-3, 10-3 Notre Dame in there, Notre Dame's still going to be a 4-point favorite over TCU. You know that, right? It's not created equally.
But, okay, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, though, that we tend to do, which is debating
Well, that's
The
why everybody's
4-team
been
playoff.
subscribing, because we go down the rabbit holes that
Yes.
everybody wants to go down. Call me the fox because I love rabbit holes.
The 4-team playoff
Even though
format.
you love glory holes.
Oh. Oh my God. I almost made a really offhanded comment. I stopped myself. Good thing I did not make it. I'll tell you what it was after. But
Okay.
Blake, the 4-team playoff, though, is now irrelevant. And I almost want to pay more attention to what does this mean for the 12 team? But it's relevant for one more year.
No, but my whole argument was you're right, it doesn't matter. My whole argument is if that is what you're standing on, better games, then you should be screaming for Alabama to be in the playoff.
Well, here's one thing that I actually, and a thought that I had that you brought up, where you're saying that many observers and those that are discussing with the new playoff is, how can we make it fair? It needs to be fair. I would argue with the playoff, if you want teams in your conference to compete, there should be some type of regulation that requires you to play a certain number of teams in other conferences at the Power 5 level. I don't know what that looks like, but
play one. You can.
If more Big Ten teams played SEC teams, I think that this argument would be a lot different if the Big Ten was beating some of these SEC teams. I think it would be a lot, and it would improve the quality of the Big Ten teams.
You know what the SEC would do?
What?
They would go to 9 conference games.
Because they don't want that. They don't want that. That's the thing.
Correct. Here's the truth, and what nobody will tell you. You know why they went to 9 conference games? They said it was because of the rivalry. No, it wasn't. It's because if you remember at the end of the year, their teams, like, remember when Oklahoma State had a loss and Alabama got into the national championship before they did? Their strength of schedule sucked. So they were like, okay, well, what if we add another conference game? So all these conferences started adding conference games, and it boosted their strength of schedule instead of playing, Tennessee Tech or whatever it is. Yeah. So that's why they went to it. But, Joe, here's the ultimate bottom line thing for me. You can't complain if you're the Big Ten, ACC, Big 12, Pac-12 when you're losing. When the king is on top, you don't get to say what the king does. And so let me ask you this. Why is there nobody from the Big Ten, coaches-wise, Big Ten, Pac-12, Big 12, ACC, why is Nick Saban going up to Washington, D.C. today and lobbying on NIL? Because they're sending the king. Okay, yes. Let's tell him they're sending the man. So my whole point in all of this is you've had chances to knock off the SEC. You didn't do it. Michigan State couldn't do it. Washington couldn't do it. USC couldn't do it. Michigan couldn't do it. Ohio State couldn't do it. Nobody can do it. And I know that it sucks for 2/3 of the country. I get it. And I want those teams to be good. It makes for a better football. The bottom line is you're not better than them. And you haven't been since 2000. Maybe some teams here and there with Ohio State. But, Joe, let me ask you this. Mm-hmm. If this were the NBA, if this were the NFL, and one division constantly won, aka AFC, aka the Patriots, wouldn't you start having some issues with what they're doing?
Yes, absolutely.
And that's what's happening. That's exactly what's happening. All of a sudden, everything Travis Kelce does, oh, look at him doing this to President Biden. How dare he do that? Well, President Biden doesn't even know where he's at. So, right. Come on. I mean, he didn't even understand what happened. So, I just, for me, do I care if you go to 9 conference games? Hell no, I don't. But don't you dare act like it's equal, because you know what's going to happen, and I'll wrap this up here. You know what's going to happen, Joe? The SEC is going to go to 9 conference games. And when the playoff committee comes out and 10-2 Penn State doesn't get in over 9-3 Alabama, you're going to know why. You're going to know why. Because you don't play in – you playing Florida is a bigger matchup than you playing Northwestern. Joe, Northwestern was the second worst team in the country last year. I would have loved to play them. And you can't say Vandy anymore because Vandy got Clark Lee and they're doing some decent things.
Yeah. My final thought on this, though, Blake, is for the teams that do complain outside of the SEC that, one, that they're not adding this 9th game and they're not following suit with the other conferences. And again, that they're complaining it's not fair, the recognition that the SEC gets, all that. I implore them to schedule more SEC opponents. Schedule more SEC opponents. Prove yourself. Beat them. Go out and play. Doesn't even need to be Georgia. Beat Mississippi State. Beat Ole Miss.
Arkansas.
Beat Arkansas. The argument will be a lot weaker when we have these conversations about who deserves to get in the playoff.